Hey there, and welcome to the A.D.K channel. I'm, of course, David. There is no Kirk or Andy. Unfortunately, they are tied up on other projects today, but I have with me Brett Carruthers from the wonderful band A Primitive Evolution. I hope I said that correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, how's it going?
I didn't know whether to go APE, which way to go on it, but I thought A Primitive Evolution is how we'll go with it. Welcome
For
to the
sure.
channel.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been great to. It is great to have you on the channel. Obviously, there's a bit of a time difference for us, so hopefully the internet doesn't drop out because we're in a bit of distance. Whereabouts are you at the moment?
I am in Toronto, actually. Yeah,
Toronto. I've been there
yeah,
once. I spent 2 days there. That was it. Not that it was a bad city; it was a lovely city, but I only had 2 days there at one point. But
yeah.
it was a wonderful place to go.
It's a quick
Um,
smash.
Right, I'm going to get into your details about the band. So, obviously, the details I have about A Primitive Evolution, we obviously want to talk about the new EP that's just come out, or came out,
Mhm.
a week ago, 7 days ago.
Yeah.
But before we get to the new EP, obviously, I want to talk about a little bit about the background behind the band. So, the band came together in 2007. I'm
Mhm.
always intrigued about how bands get together. Sometimes it's like previous bands that have worked together, or previous musicians from other bands, or so I'd like to get a little bit more of an understanding about how did you guys form, and
Yeah.
also the band name. I'm always intrigued by what does a primitive evolution mean, or why did you pick that as the band name?
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, this is it started in like the Toronto kind of early 2000s. We were playing around actually in another band. It was called Lie, and we had become friends with this guy Stu, who owned the company Play Dead Cult, and we would wear his shirts a lot. He made a bunch of his own clothes at the time. Him and his partner at the time, Bean, and all became friends. And they would come up to the shows quite often. And Lie sort of started falling apart due to some
Right.
inner business issues and other things. And Stu sort of took the opportunity to kind of be like, "Hey, like I play drums, like, and I've got this concept." And he sort of pitched. He actually pitched. He had the logo and the band name and everything already made.
Okay.
And he sort of pitched it to Steph and I as like the next project to join and to start with him. And then so we just started jamming and getting together on some stuff. And yeah, one thing led to another, and we actually kind of came up with the first album over those first couple of years. I think it took us about 2 years to kind of get the project on its feet, and then we did that first record. So yeah, so the whole thing was like Hughes had this master plan of the band that he wanted to be in, and the acronym APE and the kind of evolution sort of angle.
Okay.
Yeah, so like that, apes to humans, kind of primitive evolution, the chain of like life and death, the cycles,
Okay.
and kind of the evolutionary process. And then we sort of tried to conceptualize on that as like, how could that apply to the music as well? Like, every album is a slight evolution of the band. Everything's always evolving. Things are always changing. So it's sort of like we tried to make it an all-encompassing kind of
Okay.
name for ourselves. Yeah.
It's interesting you talked about the evolution because there is definitely that across the albums. So
Mm-hmm.
none of the albums sound the same as far as identical, but you can clearly hear elements or the genetics of the album in the next album, but with some
Right.
sort of evolution. And then on the next
Yeah.
album, again, you can hear that. You can still hear the genetics of the previous album, but with further
Yeah.
evolution, which is a great way to put it. So it takes us to the first album, APE, came out in 2009. Now, there's a lot of references that people put on press releases like Radiohead and Nirvana and stuff like that, which I didn't actually hear that much when I listened to it. I
Right.
didn't actually hear those. I heard references to more bands like The Cure, Smashing Pumpkins, Stone Temple
Mm.
Pilots, and so there
Yeah.
were some of the grunge influences, but not really the Nirvana grunge. I felt more of the textured bands is probably a best way of putting it. There was
Mm.
more elements
Yeah.
to the bands rather than just the raw grunge.
Yeah. I
Um,
would. I would. I would agree with that.
mean, when
for sure.
this first album was being written, was there an idea around this is what we want to put together, this is the style that we want to do, or was it just a case of, or it was very much an organic way of writing that that's what came out when you sat down and you started
Yeah.
writing?
Yeah, I think like when we went into doing the band, we actually thought of it that it was going to be more of an electronic project, I guess, but it became more organic. Like we thought we'd have a more industrial edge,
Hmm.
maybe even like a bit of like kind of like gorillas, like alternative with like some
Oh,
hip
okay.
hop going on. But then once we started playing music and jamming it out together, it sort of came off more in the Pumpkins. I really love the Smashing Pumpkins, and Billy Corgan is like a huge guitar influence for me. So I think once it was just if there's three of us in a room and we're riffing, then that's kind of what became the sound of that first record. Was a
Right.
lot of like it's a lot of hours of us just jamming in the jam space and really trying to figure out how the three of us kind of come together. So all of those songs were written as a group, and we'd do like we'd have hours and hours of jam sessions that we'd like kind of just go through and find the riffs that kind of spoke to us.
Okay.
And then we sort of wrote the record that way, like by piecemealing cool parts of jams and then gluing them all together.
So when you then get to the second album, The Prize, which is a really interesting album because there's basically it's a reworking of a selection of tracks from the first album, plus obviously the three new tracks that were on there.
Yeah, yeah,
And when I first read that, I hadn't heard the album, but I'd read what the album was about. And first thing that I'm never a big fan that where they of bands where they just remaster songs that were on EPs. So where they've done a track on
yeah,
an EP and then it's apparent and then it appears on the next album, and it's just
yeah.
been repackaged. But I was so surprised and delighted by the fact that when I listened to The Prize, every song that had been on the first album wasn't just a case of it had been tidied up; it had actually been reimagined,
Mm,
rethought about. The genetics of the track was still there. You could clearly tell it was the same track, but it had
mm,
just been
yeah.
reworked in a completely new way, which I thought was great. And I guess
Cool.
my kind of thought around this, or my question around this, was when the first album was written, were you already thinking we want to take some of these tracks and rework them in a different way? Or
Mm.
was that just something that happened a year down the line when you're like, we need to write some new material? And actually, we've got some ideas. We've been jamming these songs for a while and we want to change it. How did you come up with the idea to rework these tracks?
Right. Yeah. So I guess like we what had happened actually is we were moving out of the studio place that we had, which was Stu's kind of warehouse for Play Dead, and we
Mm.
called it the Play Dead Mansion. And we were moving out, and the guy who took over was actually going to turn it into a recording studio. His name was John Wozniak, and he had bought all the content of a really famous studio in Vancouver called Mushroom Studios. So it was his idea to bring Mushroom Studios to Toronto and build this whole new thing. And he was like, "Hey, I really like your band." And he met us as we were kind of swapping in and out. And he was like, "Why don't you guys like record a record here?" And we were sort of like still trying to push the first album. And we were like, well, we were thinking about doing an acoustic record really quick. And he was like, cool, that's perfect. And then, of course, it was not quick at all. And it ended up being like a pretty intense, like, year in the
Yeah.
studio making these songs with John. And he's a really great producer. And, he really, like, encouraged us to kind of do these reimaginings and, because Stephanie also plays cello, so we could add some string arrangements to things. And then, and while we were recording that record, we wrote the three other songs, "The Prize" and "I Feel It All" and "Lord of Reason," kind of came out of just because we were recording all the APE songs in this new way. It kind of inspired those three songs to kind of happen. And we so over the course of like I think it ended up being like 18 months, and we
Yeah.
so it kind of became its own beast. And John really was pushing us to kind of run with this vibe, because he, we were all in love with it and we were all digging it at a time, and so we just like kind of went with it. And I was really happy with the results, like, but I feel like it was a bit of a departure from where we were actually aiming our ship, and so sometimes you just end up in these weird tangents that kind of take off course a bit.
It does feel, when you listen to APE and then you do the prize and then you do Becoming, it does feel like there was a more direct route, but you went through the houses and round like the countryside route, and you did this whole thing over here for a bit, and then you came back on the freeway again afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely what it feels like.
But I mean, Becoming's a great album. It came out back in 2018. Ghost is a great track. I love Ghost off that album.
Oh, thank you.
And it's a far more industrial as far as the overall tone. You can hear there's elements of like some of like Nine Inch Nail influences and stuff starting to creep into the recording on that particular one. So when you came out of doing the prize and then you started thinking about, right, well, we've now got to think about we've done this acoustic one, we're going to now start thinking about more material, we're going to back on our direction again. How did you approach going into doing the Becoming then, or Becoming, sorry?
Yeah. So with Becoming, I think we were very much like, oh man, the prize was a huge departure, and we've set ourselves off course for what we intended. So we really tried to break down like what is the sound that we want to do, or like where are we going with this, and how can we make a really impactful, like, dark offering to kind of the genre that we hope to create or add to, right? So, and that was like, it was really about dissecting our influences and focusing on like just the impactfulness of the songs, I think. And we ended up doing some writing with our friend Ian, who was he's from the band Billy Talent.
Oh yeah.
And and actually, like, we wanted originally, like, again, Becoming ended up taking a really long time too to make, because we were sort of hoping to make a record with Ian DeSaw and Eric Rath, but we couldn't get money together and we couldn't get a label to get behind it. Even with Ian and Eric on board, we sort of failed to get funding from, like, in Canada you can get a grant from this thing called Factor. And so we thought we had a sure shot with Ian and Eric because they're like Juno Award winners and yada, yada, yada. But of course, we not accepted, couldn't get the money, couldn't get a label on board to back it up before it was recorded. And then by the time it kind of came up, Billy Talent had to go back into the studio to do their next record. So it kind of fell on me to make the moves, and I was just like, fuck it. I'll just do it myself, because I come from a recording background, and
right.
I've done a lot of producing and recording and engineering over the years, and I'm really passionate about it as well. So it's just like, fine, that's cool. We'll just do it the way we did APE. Like, I'll co-produce it. We'll bring someone in. And we ended up bringing my friend Kenny in. And Kenny is great. He's worked with Billy Talent as well, and so he helped me mix the record because I needed that extra set of ears. And but that whole thing was like, that's like 3 years is gone. So now we were kind of like panicking, like, oh, we got to get a record done. Like, what are we doing? Like, so we finally finished Becoming, and as you know, like, the connection with Birthday Massacre, and I've known them forever, since we were like in our early 20s. Maybe even like late teens, and I sort of reached out to them about Metropolis, and that was sort of the connection there. I was like, hey, like, I got this record done. I had finished the record now, and now I was just like, I just want to get it distributed by someone. And we approached Metropolis, and they sort of like, they loved the record and jumped right in right away, and so it was like, it finally had a home, and it was good to finally get it going.
Yeah. So, I guess, that was back in 2018. It's been 5 years. Now, obviously, we are aware that in that period of time, you've been suckered into being in with the Birthday Massacre.
Yeah.
It's one hell of a position to do because they're one of my favorite bands. I love the Birthday Massacre.
Oh, amazing.
And we've been covering
Amazing.
that on the A.D.K. It's very interesting to talk about the Birthday Massacre just because it's, if you ever watch when we talk about videos on the A.D.K channel and we do reactions, when we've done the Birthday Massacre on there, it's one of the few bands where all three of us on the channel really love the band.
Oh, cool.
Because I'm more of a rock, new metal, goth metal kind of guy.
Mhm.
Kirk's extreme metal, and Andy's into doom and death metal. But
Oh,
all
nice.
three of us really love the band. It's a
Oh,
very,
that's
it
great.
doesn't happen very often. But the
Right.
Birthday Massacre is one of those bands that we're all kind of unites us. Everyone seems to love it, and
Ooh.
it's the same on whenever I've covered it on the Dave Does channel, my other channel. Whenever I talk about Birthday Massacre, everyone seems to, no matter what their background, whether they're In Flames fans and they're dedicated In Flames fans, they're like, "Oh yeah, but I love the Birthday Massacre." So
Yeah.
it must have been a great experience, or still is a great experience. When was it
Mhm.
around 2020, I guess?
Yeah, yeah. It was coming early 2020. I joined the band officially. Yeah, and that was like I had done a bit of work on Diamonds with them just in the studio because we share a studio space together. So I'll always be kicking around, kind of helping out record some guitars or I'll track some vocals with Chibi and just engineer for them. And then when Nate decided to leave late 2019, so it was just kind of an organic like, hey Brett, you want to play bass kind of thing, and I was like, of course, like I'd love to. And it's actually like I had played keys with them when their keyboard player kind of left back in like 2004, like way back on a couple of First American tours. So like it was just that kind of moment again where they're like, oh hey, like you want back in the band kind of
Yeah.
thing. So I was like, oh perfect, like absolutely, I'd love to jump in. So it worked out great.
So how did that impact, obviously, any plans that you may have had with APE at the time? Was APE a current affair at the time? Were you gigging? What was going on with that? So how did that work joining Birthday Massacre at the time?
Yeah, so at the time, like we had just finished our first U.S. tour with Ape, like proper tour with opening for Pig,
Right.
in the States, and we had just come off that in the fall of 2019. So we were sort of like, we wanted to gear up to tour more, but we were having a lot of trouble finding touring options, and so I was like, well, it's about time we start probably considering working on some new Ape stuff anyway. And then the Birthday Massacre thing came up, and they had actually touring booked from March 2020 into the summer. But then, of course,
Something happened.
shit went south. So I kind of like, I think what I imagined would happen was like, we're going to do the TBM tour 2020, and then that was going to wrap, and then I was going to start working on the next Ape record.
Right.
And then, or trying to get more Ape touring in 2020 to support Becoming still, and then sort of juggle, just go back and forth. When TBM's on, I'll go out with them, and then when I'm home, I'll be either writing for Ape or trying to get another tour in between for Ape.
Right.
And just kind of go, just bounce back and forth and juggle the two. But yeah, none of that happened.
No, it all went a bit sideways.
Yeah. So that kind of got all screwy, and then the COVID actually kind of turned into a bit of a lot of writing. So we've actually finished a whole Ape record that's done. We've written it, so we just got to record it. And then of course we also started writing Fascination with Birthday Massacre, and that had the priority because of its deadlines and with the record label contract and everything. That kind of took the front seat. So we finished Fascination, got that out, and then sort of when the world was waking up, it was time to catch up on all the touring TBM had missed. So that was like the whole 2022 was just catch up.
Right.
Which kind of like, it puts Ape in the backseat a little bit, but I feel like Stu just had another kid, so there was a lot of things going on, and we took a gear down and kind of took the COVID time to take a break and reflect on things, and like it kind of felt nice to have a break in a way. And now that we've sort of, we wrote a whole record during the time, so I feel like that's good at least. So.
Yes, so that kind of makes a lot more sense now, because whenever we get like an EP or an album through, so I was quite surprised when I got the EP, because I was like, it's only 3 songs, and one of them's a cover, which I was like, where's the rest of the EP? Because originally I was thinking, well, there must be a couple more tracks if it's an EP. It's usually you get about 4, maybe 5 songs, and that kind of fills it out. And there's the EP is like a sampler almost of what's coming up, or because my kind of question, now that you've already said that you've been writing more material. My question originally was why do it just 3 songs? Why not wait off and do a couple more songs for the EP, or release them as singles? Because a lot of people nowadays are doing the Spotify rollout. Every couple of months they drop a new single instead. So what was the reason for doing the EP, I guess the 3-track EP now? What was the reason for getting it out there?
I think it was mostly just that we really wanted to have something out. Because it was feeling like a long time since Becoming, and we had been doing the Ace of Spades cover live probably since like 2017, I want to say. So it had actually become sort of an old song in its own way in the live sense. So we were kind of like, we got to just get the song out. And Blood Moon was actually a B-side from Becoming that didn't get onto that record. And because it didn't really fit the vibe as much, but we thought it was such a perfect pairing with the Ace of Spades cover that we almost wanted to do it like an old 45, like it's like the B-side to the Ace of Spades. So like it is almost like that kind of mentality where we're like, well, let's just crank this out like a single with a B-side, and that'll just kind of be our offering for this year and give us the window to start recording the new record.
It just kind of keeps people's awareness there, doesn't it, really?
Yeah. Like it was like, don't forget about us.
We're still here.
We're gonna do something. I promise. We're working on it. We're working on it. You know.
That makes a lot more sense, because I was sitting there scratching my head going, but it's been 5 years. How can you only have 3 songs? What's going on? I'm not.
Yeah.
Surely you could do more than 3 songs in 5 years. Come on, guys. But I guess then. Yeah. So what's my final question then for today is what's on the plans for the rest of 2023 then for the band?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, it's recording. Like we are gonna do like a small show in Toronto on April 1st, opening for one of our friends' bands. She had asked us if we wanted to do it. Her name it's Irva Khan, and you know we've been in the scene together for so long, so it was like, of course we'll come out, and it kind of lights a fire under our ass. Like we're actually gonna try and play like. Maybe like the 30-minute set will have like 2 songs from Becoming, and then the rest will be like new material that will be on the new record. So just to get us so we can play it live once and see how the songs feel, and sort of like actually get practicing them and get our brains kind of fired up and like focused on this new record, so that we can jump right in during April. We'll start production. And then May I go back out on the road with Birthday Massacre for a month, and then I'm back in June, and then I think June, July will be all recording, and then hopefully like I'm hoping to start releasing singles like this fall. Yeah.
To try and get a couple of tracks finished for the album. Drop a couple of singles before the album.
Yeah. Drop a couple of singles leading up, and then maybe early 2024 we'll have like a proper full length come out for Abe.
Excellent.
That's my plan anyway.
That's the plan. Hopefully it all comes together. So I was gutted I didn't get a chance to see the TBM when they came over at the end of last year. Was it October? I think November.
Yeah, it was. Or November. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, by the time I realised that you were over here, the tickets, everything was sold out. I was like, oh well. No chance, damn. But maybe next time. But I just want to say a big thank you for obviously dialing in and speaking to me on the phone from your car today.
Absolutely,
appreciated.
This vibe, no, that's me. It's just like I was on the way to the studio, kind of like do, and I was like, oh my god, it's 2 o'clock. So
I'm sitting there looking at the time, going, "Is he gonna? You better turn up."
Yeah, I didn't want to leave you hanging. David.
No worries. Well, just want to say again, yeah, thank you very much for spending the time today. Best of luck with all the stuff you're recording this year.
Yeah,
and of course, this is Brett from APE. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.